probably the purest form of punk rock that I can come up with. Like it was born of something true and genuine. It wasn't the first, so it doesn't have to carry that weight because you don't want to be the first of anything. I don't. I think you want to be the best of it. And I think that Operation Ivy qualifies as the best of it. I don't know that there's much out there that's better. So back in 1987, we have Operation Ivy come together as a band. Jesse Michaels, Matt Freeman, Tim Armstrong, and I don't know who the drummer's name is. I wish I did.
Dave Mello.
Okay, I did know that. Dun, 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 dun. Anyways, so they only did like what, a 7-inch and an album or something like that, and then it's only been released as one conglomerate like LP over the last however many years. So we're gonna celebrate that because it hits 30 years. What were you gonna say?
No, so yeah, they have the initial 7-inch from Lookout, one of the like first 5 Lookout releases ever,
Right?
And then you have Energy, which we're talking about now, which is the full length, and everything after that has been like different imports and stuff like that have been kind of cobbled together, and there's like semi-official releases that Lookout and other stuff is put out, and currently Hellcat got the rights back to to Energy.
Correct.
Back in the mid 2000s,
2006,
yeah, whenever the royalties actually stopped coming in from Lookout.
How crazy is that happened? Well, before we get into that, real quick, yeah, it was May 28th of 1989 when Energy dropped. I just want to show you this stuff because it just so happened that I got this. Okay,
right.
This wasn't planned at all. Well, this part was because I pre-ordered them, but they redropped the cassette with a 2-tone cassette, black and white.
No, that's cool.
There's also a one that's got the artwork on the tape.
Yeah.
And then this dude brought in a record collection the other day to the shop. And so I was able to purchase 2 copies of Energy, right?
Mm-hmm.
These aren't the Hellcats. These are like 2006 or older. I can't figure out what. I can't figure out exactly what year.
Yeah, look at that. Look at that compared to mine. Mine's a regular Hellcat one.
Yeah, I have the Hellcat one too.
Yeah.
But I was so happy to get these. I was like, well, I'm keeping that. But in addition to that, he had the Hectic EP, which I'm also keeping.
Mm-hmm. That's the 7-inch we were referencing.
Correct. Yeah, as soon as you said it, I was like, oh, yeah. And it's on just straight old black vinyl. But this right here, I've never owned. I've owned the Hectic EP. I've had Energy. I've never had this.
So what show is that of? Is that?
It's got Hedgecore and Left Behind on it.
Okay.
So I don't know much about this other than it's freaking dope, and it's on red wax with a plain white label. So
does it have a Lookout label on it? Is it?
No, it says recorded at Gilman by Edge. Oh, damn, I didn't even read the back of it like an asshole. Recorded at Gilman by Edge on August 24th, 1987. That's so badass.
That's awesome.
I also have this right here. Shout out to Chris Klink from Born to Lose, Nowhere Bound, and Generation Exit. He gifted me this. I believe it was for my birthday. It's just a demos LP, but it's got like all these demo songs on it. It's got a lot of the songs and stuff that we know, right? Mm-hmm. But it's like different versions of all of it. And I would be willing to bet that Hedgecore, it's probably on here, I would think. But there's a couple of songs on here that I didn't recognize. Mm-hmm. They might just be, named different. And then I've only listened to this one time all the way through because I've got too many records.
Yeah.
But and then last but not least, the dude at the record store had this Rancid Roots Radicals 7-inch that I didn't have either, so I snatched it up. Yeah, but so this is like a very important record to me, obviously. I mean, how many copies do I need of one album, right? I've got it on CD. I've probably got 3 copies on vinyl, plus all the tapes. Like I've got, dude, check this shit out. I actually have the original. This is what came out in 1989. on this white cassette.
Nice.
So this is actually original. This is the second one. These are both pre-barcode. I'm such a dork, dude. I love this stuff. But this is an album that quite literally changed punk rock. Like it just, there was pre-Operation Ivy, there's post-Operation Ivy, and they only lasted a couple of years. The explosion of fame, the pressure, probably, I think, would have affected Tim and Jesse equally, but in very different ways. They ultimately decided as a group to disband, which I think it's one. I think it's both perfect and a disaster at the same time, because they left us with everything that they did was perfect.
Mm-hmm.
But like, it's like, damn, bro, like what could they have done? But then we wouldn't have Rancid probably, right? Like, so like, I don't know. As bittersweet as it is, it's kind of like, yep, that's what they were supposed to do, man. What a weird situation.
No, it is. And I was reflecting on this earlier today because they are, they're like, there's a lot of things like this in music and even in punk music. Like, think of like the Sex Pistols. The Sex Pistols are like this, right? They have one album and they have one US tour and they have this big old mark on all of music history. Well, Operation Ivy is kind of similar to that. And there's a lot of these, burnout bands that go through real quick. Well, Operation Ivy found a way to be like this precious moment in time kind of thing, and none of the members had to die or become these like tragic figures or nothing like. They just never did it again. And they have held to that, and it has kept so much of like the mystique. Even if they do, I saw that the Doom Regulator is in the studio, and they're going to be making.
I'm so excited.
Yeah, they're going to be making some music, and Jess has performed these songs at Rancid shows with them, and Lars has performed it, and they've done this, and that's always the thing. Operation Ivy getting back together. Laura Jane Grace putting together the Change.org petition a few years ago at Riot Fest to get Operation Ivy back together. And well, as I've always said, I would definitely go see it if it ever happened. Heck yeah, I'd want to go see it. It is so cool that they've been able to keep that mystique up of they never came back together again. And when they did it, they were teenagers. So it would never, ever, ever be the same. It can never be the same. And they are so acutely aware of that. And I like how unbothered they seem about the end of the band. Now, obviously, we do know Tim took it hard in the immediate aftermath. But as far as like the legacy of the band, it's like you see a guy like Jess Michaels, he kind of just does his own thing. He's like an artist and he does all kinds of his other stuff and makes music. He is so comfortable with it. Think about a guy like that. Like these other guys went on to big things, like Matt and Tim went on to, like to be punk rock legends. And Jess is that too, but in a different capacity. But Jess is like so at peace with the fact like that they were happy ending the band the way they did. Like that, it's something that they get to keep. Like that. It's like almost like the football team they were on in high school. Yeah, they didn't do it when they were in their mid-20s, and who knows what had happened, but they've always got that little moment in time.
I do like that they were. I appreciate that they were young when this all happened. I like that they were mature enough to stop it when they stopped it, and then not try to capitalize on a reunion tour. Because if there's any punk band out of the last, I don't know, history of punk rock really, that could have capitalized on a reunion, it would be Op Ivy. I think they might be the one, even, because they're, like you said, all the members are alive. They didn't have some crazy breakup where they hate each other. It was just a, hey, look, this isn't what we want to do. Let's call it a day. It's an amicable split.
And I think all the, like, to your point too, where they really could have cashed in on that is because they would have had the support from like most of like the punk rock community and like you'd have the guys from Green Day out there, like, doing promotion for their, the return to Gilman of Op Ivy and that kind of thing. And dude, they're so important that to everyone who like made money and made a career of doing it after the fact that they really could have cashed in a way that, again, wouldn't have probably not seen that impure. It's just kind of cooler that they didn't.
It depends on when they did it, if it would have seemed impure. I think they could do it now and it would seem okay, but I also like that they're just going to do a different band. I like that because they're almost certainly going to cover some Op Ivy songs live, but like it won't be an Op Ivy set. They're going to have new music, and I like that. I love that. And I love my stinking bootleg shirt. I wear it so much. Dude, people are like, what is that? I'm like, dude, you don't even know.
It's in my gym bag right now.
Let's go. If you ever need another one, man, you let me know. I got you, bro. I can't imagine what it would have been like. Okay, so let's just say that they do Op Ivy, they break up, Tim starts. What was that band him and Matt started?
Is
They did. They
down
did. They did two bands before
down
Rancid came
dance
around.
hall crashers,
Dance Hall Crashers is what I was thinking of, and
basic radio.
Basic Radio. So let's say
Yeah.
they do that, they kick around for a little bit, boom, nothing happens. Tim does his thing. He gets sober by getting talking to Brett. Rancid starts. Everything's exactly the same. 1995 comes. Out come the Wolves come right after Green Day Dookie. Let's say fall 95, spring 96, we get an Operation Ivy reunion tour. I think that would have been simultaneously like the best and worst decision.
Yeah,
But like that's when it would have been the peak.
It would have headlined like the Lollapalooza that you went to. That would have been like a headline attraction of that tour.
Damn. It
Right?
would have.
Because
I wouldn't have seen Rancid, I would have seen Op Ivy instead.
because now you're having Op Ivy exist in the world of third wave ska, of like the Boss Tones and all
That's
this
what
other
I'm
stuff,
saying,
and
man.
No Doubt, and even the stuff that doesn't really sound like them. Like
Dude, that might have been the end of Rancid right there.
but think about some of these bands that have been around for like 40 years, but have like one little section of hits, but can always sort of sustain. There's a few in punk, but then there's a lot of like outside of punk as well. And I'm trying to think of one off the top
Like the
of my
Eagles.
head. Yeah, it could be like that, but I think of a lot of like British bands too. But anyway, they would get back together, and then they would have just been a major big band, almost like a super group. You know what I mean? And it is funny to think of where, because again, the Rancid guys in 95, 96 are not that far off from being the celebrities you're seeing on the MTV shows and all that. So it wouldn't be crazy if some of those guys reformed this band that would have been so like chic to like them, right? Like all the celebrities would have been into them. It would have been that kind of thing. So
it would have honestly, it would have ruined it. I'm so glad they didn't do it.
It would have, because they would have been the band, the way that like the Chili Peppers have become the band that like people in the mainstream have just sort of like, oh yeah, rock and punk, and we'll take them, or they do that with like the Foo Fighters and stuff. The Foo Fighters is probably a kind of a good analogy. This band that's like a piece
very,
of
very good,
big
very
band
close.
that comes in, and I think that would have been a real big possibility, especially like think of the way VH1 and even some of those really capitalized on ska specifically, because it had roots to older music and stuff like that, and so it was such a big phenomenon in the late 90s, in an era where Operation Ivy, like we couldn't be further away from Operation Ivy existing or talk of them existing or anything in the late 90s, maybe the era where they were the most influential.
Well, like, okay, so then here's the question. Is it a good thing that they stayed broken up? Is it a good thing that Operation Ivy stayed broken up and never got back together?
Yeah, I think so.
I think so too. And I think that that's kind of the topic that we've been floating around the last 5 minutes. But like, I think it's interesting because I think it would have been the end of Rancid maybe, and it would have been like the end band. Whereas Operation Ivy is as pure a punk rock band as you will ever get. They did it because they loved it. They were all about making change in positive change. They also created a new sound. They did it DIY, and then they bounced, right? The fact that anybody could ever hate on Tim Armstrong is beyond me because of the stuff that he did, even with just that band, not even including the amazing things he's done outside of that. The fact that they were able to do that and stayed with it. They stuck with it all these years. I bet they've been offered millions of dollars to get back together and tour. And they were just like, look, we have these principles and we just don't really want to bend our rules. These are our rules. This is what we live by. And it's not really what we're trying to do. We want to create new stuff and not go back and then I think I feel like that's probably what it is to them, is it's not only just kind of gross, but it's like, we don't want to live in the past. We want to live right now and in the future. Like, we don't want to rehash the old stuff. I mean, they play a lot of new music at Rancid shows. I mean,
why would they think about like what Tim does and the generation of guys that you and I like in particular, like a lot of these guys that peaked around the late 90s, like they still don't realize like even NoFX, they're just breaking up. Like they're not going on that nostalgia tour. It's more of the 80s bands that are doing that nostalgia run. I would say though, just I'm thinking a lot about your earlier question. It's like, but we also needed Rancid. Like without Rancid specifically, there's a lot of other stuff that happened too. So kind of them clearing out was probably very, very useful. I think of them. I think the analogy is they're almost like a West Coast version of like Ian Mackay, Minor Threat, and Fugazi.
Right.
I think might be the way to think of it. Except for like Fugazi would be the way Fugazi's kind of thought of and not fully understood today would be the way Operation Ivy would have been to your earlier had they got back together in the late. They'd have been more of this fascination in a different kind of way. Whereas even the Op Ivy thing, it took even another like 10 years after the fact. It wasn't until like even years and years after Rancid had really drawn out and stuff that people really started going back to Berkeley and unearthing that scene and really acknowledging how important the Op Ivy stuff really, really is. Like that legend, I think, has more grown in time. And had it been explored in the 90s, it would be done with. I don't think we'd be digging into it probably as deep
Right.
anymore.
Well, I mean, had they not stayed broken up, like what would we have gotten? Another album that there's no way it would have been as good. There is no way that you could improve upon what they gave us. And
Well,
I feel like that's kind of what they thought. They're like playing this music and they're like, how are we going to top this, dude? Like, we're famous all of a sudden. We don't like that. We can't be better than this. We did it. Let's go. Let's go home. We did our tour.
It's tricky though when bands go back to their original groups when they get famous. It rarely works. Whenever
Right.
they evolve into something else. Like it does sometimes, but usually not at the level when it's this kind of like magic type of thing to really sit there
Well, so
and rekindle it.
if they had gotten back together, when would it have been? Post Out Come the Wolves, maybe?
Yeah, I think so. Because I think that's when the demand would have probably been there.
Yeah.
Yeah, like
Man,
I said,
that would have been
it
crazy.
feels like something that would have been a failure. Like it feels like something that would have been like a cautionary tale of like, remember how it's like
Right.
we'd be saying, remember how embarrassing it was when Op Ivy got back together, or how much
So,
that didn't work. It feels like rock
right.
history is just littered with that sort of story.
Yeah, so because as much as like they might have done it as a very innocent and legitimate, intentions, it would have come off a little, they would have gotten a lot of shit for it.
Hmm. Hmm.
Because that's the thing that they stand for, is being, you know, authentic, I guess is the right word.
Yeah.
And that would have seemed kind of inauthentic. This is what I know based on what I know about Tim and Matt.
I think
I
of
mean,
it
Jesse, excuse me.
in the late 90s. You had the Sex Pistols reunion, and that was so poorly received. And every reunion they've had
Yeah.
since then has been so poorly received. And I think this one
Yeah.
wouldn't have had quite the same animosity. Like people wouldn't have had that the way they've kind of wanted to be mad at the Pistols. But I think it would generally be served the same way. Like when the punk bands do it, like even like Circle Jerks or these ones that kind of do it and you kind of enjoy. It feels like such a small time deal unless it's so rare. Like like when the Misfits play together, I guess it still kind of feels like a big deal, and but it's like an event. We're not gonna get a new like Danzig and Jerry together album. We're getting these events every now
Right.
and then of these big shows. So the best version probably would have been that, and that's something I could see actually of happening more in the more recent times with when music has become about these major festivals. There I could have really seen some festival, whether it be any punk or any alternative festival. Heck, what was it? It was a Coachella did the reunion of No Doubt as a big thing like a couple of months ago. I could see one of these festivals doing the reunion of Operation Ivy. You could see like Riot Fest paying $1 bazillion for that to be like the centerpiece
Right.
event that they would have done. But now I just think that time is probably even past on that, especially with Doom Regulator happening. I think this is sort of the path through that in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I definitely think that Doom Regulator happening is them closing the door on that ever being a possibility.
But like, it's good because
It's
the
still
whole,
it's good. I'm happy. I like what we've got.
I want to say like, and a reason for it, it has and having less to do with like credibility or selling out or whatever. But like, look at the name of this album, Energy, and the spirit of this album, and what they tried to capture was basically this rambunctious teenage scene at Gilman Street. There's no way men over the age of like 24 could actually
Right.
ever replicate that in that same sort of way. So it would never have it would be like a New Kids on the Block or something trying to do it all over again. It just wouldn't work the same. That's why something like a Doom Regulator probably feels like a little more natural.
You put that very well. I like that. I like the way you put that. Or you said that very well. However, whatever the words were that I was supposed to give you, the compliment is the same compliment.
I took it, man. I'll take it every
I like that a
way.
lot. I like how you put that, and I think that it's as close to perfection as you're ever going to get as well. I think that on a list of like top punk albums, the punk rock blood that flows through the veins of every like angsty teenager, I don't know that you'll get a better representation of that than Operation Ivy. Because if you think about it, you're like, okay, well, what about the Pistols? Well, they were more uh A, fabricated, and B, political, like on a larger stage.
Hmm.
The Clash, they were fighting for like world stuff.
Those bands are for
Operation Ivy were
grown-ups.
like, right, and Operation Ivy were kids talking about their time, their scene, their town, their home, and it resonated with other kids who were in their town and their scene and their homes. And so like there's this like purity that comes with it. And I don't mean to like just be ridiculous with this, but there
No,
is.
yeah,
There's a
like
purity,
like
which
an
is why they
innocence
couldn't
almost.
exist.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's some naivety even. Like there's a little. They were really intelligent, but they were still young. They didn't have wisdom yet. They
Well,
didn't
I
have
mean,
age yet,
they,
and that's
they
good.
I mean, they go on their one tour, and I think it was that tour that really sort of broke them up. Where also like they realized, like Jess probably realized, like, oh, being on tour kind of sucks. You know what I mean? And having to live together and all of that kind of stuff. But like it was like their parents were like helping them put the car together to get on the thing because they were like just barely out of high school. Like Matt was borrowing the equipment from the high school band. You know what I mean? Like
Crazy.
they were that close in proximity, and they are really credited though. I think in putting youth into punk rock and into pop punk specifically. Like we take that so for granted. Like we think of like the Blink 182s and the Green Days and the Sum 41s and all that, and you think of like the Bart Simpson, the Snotty Kid. You think it's a
Right.
very teenage music. You think of teenage angst, and angst, yes, was always a part of punk, but it was more anger, more so than I would say necessarily angst. Like that, I love that LA stuff, but it's more like as Greg Graffin put it, it's more like your soundtrack to your depression. Is kind of what
Right.
that stuff is, and has always been said. The appeal of Gilman, and obviously early on in Gilman's existence, Operation Ivy is basically the house band. They're the the Ramones to their CBGBs over there. That was the club that the kids could get into because punk rock. You couldn't go see the Dead Kennedys at the Roxy in LA. You know what I mean? It's at 1 o'clock in the morning, and you can't get in
Right.
there anyway. This is something that's literally Gilman, no different than really like a rec center. It's a public collective that has like public ownership and board members and all that kind of thing. So it's kind of by the kids for the kids, and they were the first representative. They're part of that first generation that ever did that. So they were helping define it because I was going through like the songs on Energy, and there are these cool, like you said, like these punk rock songs, like the blood of like that suburban rage that sort of defines punk. It's all in here. But what I also love about it is like the stakes of these songs are actually very, very low. As intense as they are, if you kind of break down the lyrics, most of it's about like you're not my friend anymore and that kind of stuff, or like we as a scene need to come together and do our thing. Like that's pretty much all of it. But it could also be extrapolated to like these macro issues and like these bigger political
Yeah.
issues. So it colors in both lines, but there is that sort of youthful in it. Like you don't have to go that deep into these songs either. It can also just be about you like wanting your scene to be protected and just another crowd and all that sort of stuff that it really hits on very elements of youth culture, but that at the same time, guys like us who are a lot older can still listen to it, and it has that sort of relevant themes to it. It's got that anger, it's got that
Yeah.
authenticity. It doesn't sound outdated to me at all. Still, when I listen to it,
That's actually one of the crazier things about it is that it really doesn't. As far as so, it is a little bit young because it was young.
Mhm.
So yeah, it is about you're not my friend anymore, and it is about their local scene. But there are topics in that album that are very. It makes it very clear that they're mindful of the world around them and the state of the world. Uh, you know, there's a little bit of optimism that comes with being 17, 18, 19, 20 years old that you get cynical and jaded when you're old, man. Like the more I'm around, the more I'm like, dude, the world's got no hope. But when I was 20, I was like, dude, we can change some shit. And that is all in this record, man.
well, and you got to realize, so all the punk that came out around this and before this, again, all that LA grown up stuff, it's all based in like nihilism, right? And like the
Right.
children in the black hole and all of this kind of stuff. And you know what I mean? And so it's that sort of thing where it's Operation Ivy comes out of San Francisco. And it's funny because punk is always like the counter to, and it is like I've always said, punks are the cool hippies. Like punks are the hippies that aren't like, dumb or whatever. But there is sort of that like educated optimism that sort of flows through that young person. Like you think of
Did-
someone that would sort of want to be on the cusp of like art and culture that's in the Gilman music, that's in Operation Ivy specifically, that's not present in that like despairing LA kind of music.
That's true. But did you say that punks were like hippies that were dumb?
No, yeah, but I mean that in a. So
Okay, no,
I no, I know what I mean. Okay, like so here's I try to
no,
explain
that's
this.
one of those things where you're like, I said that, but that's not really what I meant.
Yeah, cause I almost mean it the
Because,
opposite.
dude,
Like,
you saw me, I was like, what? Like, I
no,
agreed at first, and I was like, wait a minute, dumb.
I'm
I
trying
was
to
like,
make my
okay,
point of like I think hippies like when I think of
welcome to
hippies
podcasting,
like
people. This is what we
they've
do.
almost got it. I think hippies almost have it. But like the punks just get what the hippies get wrong. I've just always felt that like in every point. And early on, punks were like in direct opposition to like hippie class.
I was
and
gonna say
hippie
that's
culture.
changed a lot, though. People are more apt to equate a punk with a hippie now than they were when punk came out.
Yeah, because now we blend countercultures just as one together.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and people say a lot of stuff about like peace, love, harmony, and I'm like, that's a hippie thing, not a punk thing. That stuff wasn't together in the '70s, maybe even the '80s. But
yeah, but
I'm not opposed to it.
It definitely fits when you get to the Gilman scene, though. When you think about like Gilman having like the rules,
that's true.
So again, I think that the part of the country just definitely matters. Of where this stuff.
Yeah, because that wasn't in New York. Wasn't having that shit probably.
No. It's not there in New York, and it's definitely not in L.A. It's not in D.C. But it's happening in the Bay Area, and you think about
fucking hippies.
Yeah, and you think of the bands that came out of there. So you get like you get Operation Ivy and you get Green Day, which compare them to all their punk peers. It just sounds like they have more sun than the rest of them, right? It just sounds like
they're a little more optimistic. They're a little more chill.
Yeah. And I think that was just the thing. Even like those Ramones core bands and stuff. There's again the stakes are just a little bit lower with those bands that all came out of that section.
You get bands like Filth that came out of the same scene, and I kind of wonder how that happened.
Yeah.
But man, so okay. This record is often talked about as like this like ska album, right? I hear it called a ska record a lot. And I've always kind of thought about it. It's got the black and white artwork, the two-tone stuff, and da-da-da-da-da, right?
Mm-hmm.
I listened to it twice this week in its entirety just because I wanted to hear it again. It's been a while since I've listened to it all the way through, and it's got way more straightforward punk rock in it than I remember.
I think it's punk. Like if you categorize it on the spectrum of more, if it was more punk or more ska, I think it's more punk.
Generally. The other album we're going to talk about tonight also got the same question, but I got asked in high school, is this a punk record? And I always said it was. So is Against All Authorities. So is Suicide Machines, in my opinion, are punk rock, you know? But like, I always thought of this album as like the one that blended the ska and the punk, but it's a heavy punk. Like it's a lot of punk rock. But I think the thing is that some of the songs that are, I guess the right word would be the bigger songs are real heavy in the ska. It's just like Rancid. All the bigger songs are the more like chill. The tempo's not quite as up. It's just not quite as fast of a song. Let me pull up the track list real quick.
Well, yeah, a lot of the songs that have translated out and a lot of other bands have like covered and stuff like that tend to be the more ska songs. So I think ska has been more the interaction that people have had with this record more broadly, even though it does come from a band that I think it's more predominantly punk, as we've said.
It's funny because I just never really thought about it as that, but it absolutely is more punk rock than anything. But like, I think I think of Operation Ivy and I think Take Warning. Like that happens a lot. I'll think them. It's such a chill song. That's one of their bigger songs. I think. Maybe I think. Let's see. Let's look at their streams to see what it is. Okay. You got Sound System, Knowledge, Bombshell, Unity, and The Crowd. Interesting. Okay.
That's about.
I would have. Go ahead.
Yeah, I would say that's about what I would figure you would be.
Really, I would have thought Take Warning was like 1, 2, or 3. But maybe I'm just a punk rocker that's been around it more.
Yeah, I'm sure it'd be right around Knowledge and Sound System would be up there, and you knew Bombshell would be up there, so it's kind of
Dude, the first half of this record is ridiculous. I mean, the deep cuts on it are outstanding, though.
Well, there's like a million songs on it in the spirit of Rancid, but it doesn't really overstay its welcome. It's not a super, super long record. It's just 19 songs that are kind of stuffed in.
Okay, are you talking about Energy or Operation Ivy? You're talking about just Energy specifically, right?
Energy, yeah.
Let me look at the song. Let me look at the track listing on just Energy, because it's always lumped together on everything you get other than an LP.
Yeah,
like if you get it on cassette or CD, it's all of it. So
I'm
I have
talking
to look
about
at it.
Knowledge Through Missionary.
Okay, yeah. So how many songs is that? How do you have a? Can you tell me? Do you
That would be 19 songs. It's got so even like
what's
what I have here. It's side 1 is 10 songs. Side 2 is 9.
yeah no okay. So what's the runtime on that? You think?
Wikipedia says it's 36:48.
Yes, perfect.
Yeah, that's what I said. It's 19 songs. Let me just look at because I got this up. The longest one is Bad Town at 2:35 or
Ooh, Bad
take,
Town's so good.
that one and Take Warning at 2:44. So two of the more those two kind of ska little bit slowed
Yeah.
down ones are the long song, which again would be at odds with the kind of jamming music that a lot of this music kind of invokes. So you think of like a lot of like those long like stoner anthems that would go along with more reggae infused music, but even
Right.
this at its longest doesn't hit 3 minutes in any one spot of this album.
Dude, what a freaking
I
insane record.
I
It's
think
just so good.
the first like the A side of those first 10 songs are more in the pop punk sort of like the Operation Ivy sound, I would say. That pop punk pioneering sound that's so influential is more the first side. The second side of the record, side 2, has more of the stuff that I think you see in their later projects. There's
Okay.
a lot of Proto Rancid and Transplants and these other bands. I think in the second side, what makes this obviously different than anything else that they ever put out is the Jess Michaels factor, which he's such a big part of this record because Matt does these things on Rancid Records, and we get little hints of Tim and his songwriting and his singing, and he's got this kind of nicer voice at this point than he did with.
It's so strange to
it's
hear.
so
You can
little,
barely
it's so
tell
tiny.
Tim.
But the record really is dominated by Jess's voice. I think that's like the most prominent thing, really on the record, and it really trips me out when I talk about how it relates to like the rest of what happened to Rancid's career. Jess Michaels was such a proto Lars, and like we had no idea. When you think about how he contributes to that music, it's a lot of how Lars has like the screaming side that he can do on like the Rancid 2000, and then the singing stuff that he does on Out Come the Wolves and everything in between. And I look at how Lars kind of interacts with the music. I know Lars talked about being a big fan of this when it came out, and it's amazing how much I think Lars's contribution to Rancid is very much similar to what Jess did, and that whole kind of thing. Like I think there's a version where these songs could have existed with like basically Lars as the singer through a lot of this. Now it wouldn't quite have like the spunk. I think they needed Jess for that. I think with Lars it would have been a little more of a punk rock styling to it, but you definitely could see a lot of where they got that style and that sound from. A lot of it's apparent right here in what they were doing as teenagers.
It's crazy, man. It's just so wild to look back on. Is there a song on here? Is there a deep cut that stands out to you? Is there one that's like off the beaten path that you would recommend to people?
Okay, so I don't know if it's off the beaten path, but After Knowledge, which that's like one of the consensus great punk songs of all time.
Yes.
I think Unity is the other Operation Ivy song that it's just that pure teenage passion. I think the way he's just there, kind of screaming, and then Gonna Find You actually sounds like a proto Pennywise song when you listen to it. Actually, you could see where there was some little like skate
dude,
punk.
it really does sound like Pennywise.
And it's like if Pennywise did an Op Ivy song, it would probably come out like that. And then
Dang, I never really thought about the fact that it has so much in common with a Pennywise song.
But yeah, go through it. Go to and like every part of it takes like the rides that the Pennywise songs take.
Gonna find you. Yeah, dude.
That would be on like the Pennywise album that we put out not too long ago. I also love Freeze Up, where they say the name of the year wrong because they were so nervous in the recording. That's why it's 1989. It should be like I think it's supposed to be 1988. Stand up and take a look around. But when they recorded it, they were so nervous and he just got the wrong take in.
Wait, really?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
And then I also have the song Artificial Life, which I noted here could have been a song on Dominoes or Indestructible. And then I went back and wrote down, or like a song on Wolves that has that sort of like say goodbye when you see me sign. Like Artificial Life kind of has that's sort of thing on it. And then some of the other ones right at the end, Big City. Like, man,
okay, that's mine. That's the one I was going to say.
That's a Hellcat Records song. I gotta tell you what Hellcat Records band that sounds like, but that just sounds like a Give 'Em the Boot song that you're just hearing on there. It's very.
I was waiting. I was hoping you weren't going to get Big City. That's
maybe
mine.
You got
that's
like a Poet's Life kind of vibe to it. And then Missionary, I thought ended with a bit of a return to that pop punk flavor that they have early in the album with that more energetic. But also, you were talking about the way on the last Rancid album how they had a good closer. Well, Missionary kind of has that Rancid closing vibe formula. It's not quite as
Yeah.
refined as they have it later on, but you could see the outsets there. It's just such a fascinating album because one other thing. I know I'm still at a lot of what you had there, but on the song Caution, there are these little
Okay.
bass breakdowns. If you listen to them, it sounds just like what eventually turns into Maxwell Murder. So all of a sudden he just does these like little bass doodles, and he kind of has them at random points. You know, Caution is a very Rancid-y song because you have Tim and Jess back and forth in that song, kind of the way Tim and
Right.
Lars eventually do it. But listen to the little bass breakdowns and tell me you can't hear
That's
the start
interesting.
of where Maxwell Murder sort of ends up. So I just the last list that I did of this, and I've listened to this album a lot over the years, so it really wasn't new, is I wanted to listen to it kind of through the Rancid lens of how other things later on sounded like. I didn't think I'd find a Pennywise song in here. That was a revelation I didn't think I'd have, but in general, it was fun because it predates all of this stuff. So, and you know, it had such an influence one way or the other.
Well, one of the things that I like about Big City, I just like the song, but there's a part in the song where Jesse sounds like the singer of that band Grimple. You ever listen to Grimple?
Mm-hmm.
He sounds so much like them that like the other day I was like looking online. I was like, did he have a guest vocal spot on here somewhere? It sounds so much like him, but it stands out a lot to me, and that's my favorite deep cut on the album. There's other songs that I like a little bit better, but as far as like a deep cut where it's like, man, wasn't expecting this one to be so good. It's not one of their big hits or whatever. The whole album's kind of amazing, though. I mean, even with all the other extra tracks on the streaming version, it's a pretty flawless record.
It really is, man. Jess's voice goes into like 5 different voices on some of these songs too. Like
He does.
there's not really like a consistent register that he has. Sometimes he's singing and he's doing like the grunge thing. Sometimes he's doing like the up and down kind of hip hoppy, like white boy hip hop sort of MC kind of thing on some of these songs. It's take it to the front and we're gonna. And then he's doing like, you know, on the crowd he's doing that. Like it's really all over the place. But he does all of them fairly well, and none of them really sound really like out of place when he's doing them.
He's incredibly unique and incredibly true to himself. I think I don't see anything, I don't hear anything, I've never heard anything that leads me to believe there's any inauthenticity there. It's strictly he's making the songs that he wants to make, he's saying the things that he wants to say, and that's what you get with this band is you get straightforward, you know, unique, authentic music. And that's something that you don't get a lot, man. I'll be honest. There's a ton of bands that we love that they're very authentic, but they're not unique, or they're very unique, but it sounds kind of like they just kind of did it for the sake of doing it versus, you know, for the cause or whatever. And it's interesting. This band is kind of perfect.
Yeah, a band that really like think of the ambition of a project like Operation Ivy to put this together as like we take ska and punk so for granted. It wasn't as familiar, like it's not as natural of a connection in the mid '80s. Culturally, it's more of a connection, but actually like diffusing it the way they did and what it came out with, there wasn't as many templates to go off of.
No, there's a little bit, but even the stuff that existed wasn't the same like speed. Like it wasn't the same tempo.
Yeah, that's why I just feel like the subcultures were more connected back then, more so than the actual music itself. You know, had it without like this album, there would be no third wave ska that all the true ska heads hate. You know what I mean? Like this stuff had to sort of come out with this kind of Americanized stuff that very much sounded like American punk and American pop punk.
So
had to get grounded somewhere.
You're telling me that Operation Ivy is to blame for Real Big Fish, huh?
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, yes, but like Real Big Fish had a couple of good songs.
Yeah. Operation Ivy is responsible for like all of us, like people holding out up for ska, even when ska punk gets really bad. It's like Operation Ivy is like this thing it's like your shining guiding light to always point to of redemption.
They're one of the very, very small amount of bands that whenever you talk about them publicly, I don't hear a lot of backlash. You know what I'm saying? Like you talk about any band that you talk about, it could be Pennywise, great example. a band that you talk about them, and you get the people that are like, oh yeah, but every song sounds the same. And then you talk about Rancid, and you're like, oh, they're so boring. They just try to be interesting, and oh, they sold out, and then they said they didn't, and it's just like all this stupid bullshit, right? I don't ever really hear anything negative about Operation Ivy. I'm sure I will now that I said that publicly on a podcast, but generally speaking, I don't really hear a lot of just shit talk.
Yeah, and that's the benefit of only having one album too. Like that's just having that.
Man, I'm telling you,
there's less time to hate you. Like, there's less things to hate. Like
right.
Fat Mike has talked about this. Like he's like whenever he got a bad review on one of their more recent albums, he's like, well, was the 13th Ramones album very good either? You know what I mean? Like it's hard when you have this long career. There's a lot to be picked apart. Where it's like,
was the 13th Ramones album any good?
You know, there's 19 songs on this one, maybe 20 in general. Like, but that's why these things in all of music keep their mystique when there's just that little tiny bit. That's why, like, I was doing some reading on the Germs earlier today. It's like that's why like the Germs are so have so much mystique, because we never had to see like Darby Crash go through like his new wave era in the mid '80s and get sick of him. You know what I mean?
It's
kind of
one
get
of
to
those...
live in that moment forever. But again, Op Ivy, like they're all still just happy and healthy and stuff.
It's the silver lining, you know. I do think it was the probably the purest form of punk rock that I can come up with. Like it was born of something true and genuine. It wasn't the first, so it doesn't have to carry that weight, because you don't want to be the first of anything. I don't. I think you want to be the best of it. And I think that Operation Ivy qualifies as the best of it. I don't know that there's much out there that's better.